I was standing near the window, hands folded in front of me when he said it. Not quietly, not privately. He said it into the room with the confidence of someone who believed the room belonged to him. "There's no point pretending this is still happening," he said. "We're not getting married today." The wedding coordinator froze mid-step. My mother's hand tightened around the back of a chair. Someone near the doorway laughed once, softly, the way people do when they think they've misheard. I didn't move. I kept my weight evenly balanced, heels flat against the stone floor. The morning light came in clean through the glass, catching on the row of white chairs arranged outside. Everything was already set. He turned slightly, enough to make sure everyone could see his face. Calm, assured, almost relieved. "I've made a different decision," he continued. "One that makes more sense long-term." There it was, sense, practicality. The language he always used when he wanted to sound reasonable while taking something away. The silence that followed wasn't accidental. It spread because no one knew where to put their eyes. Some looked at him. Some looked at me. Most looked at the floor as if a misstep might make them complicit. I focused on the edge of the table beside me. The seating chart was still there, printed on heavy cream paper. My name and his name at the top. Centered, balanced. I noticed the faint crease where someone had folded it earlier, then smoothed it back out. He cleared his throat, filled the quiet. "This isn't personal," he said. "It's just reality. I've been offered a different future, a better aligned one." The wedding planner finally found her voice. I'm sorry, are you saying you're postponing?" "No," he said, smiling tightly. "I'm saying this was a mistake." He said it the way people announce a correction, not a loss. I felt eyes on me again, waiting for something, a reaction, a plea. A question, I gave them nothing. He shifted his stance, impatience leaking through the polish. "You don't need to stand there," he added, glancing in my direction. "There's no reason to keep pretending." I waited a beat before answering. Silence has weight when you let it sit. "I understand," I said. My voice was even, low, not loud enough to compete with his performance but clear enough to land. That seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. He exhaled sharply. "This isn't a discussion," he said. "I've already made arrangements. The deposits are covered. I'll handle the fallout." Handle. As if the room were a problem to be solved, not people to be addressed. Someone behind him whispered my name. I didn't turn. He took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to feel intentional. "You'll be fine," he said. "You're capable. You'll land on your feet." It was the closest he came to kindness, and it was entirely self-serving. I looked past him, out through the glass, where the officiant was waiting with his binder tucked under one arm. He hadn't been told yet. The sun caught the metal clasp, flashed once, then settled. "I'm going to ask everyone to clear the room," the wedding coordinator said, too quickly. Her professionalism was cracking. He nodded, satisfied. "Yes, that's best." Then, as if remembering an obligation, he added louder, "I hope you can all respect that this is the right decision." No one answered. I picked up my phone from the table. The screen lit briefly, then went dark again. I didn't check it. I just held it, letting the familiar weight anchor me. For a moment, he seemed to expect more. Tears, accusations. Something he could step over on his way out. When it didn't come, his jaw tightened. "Well," he said, forcing a shrug, "that's that." No one moved. The quiet pressed in, dense and unmistakable. Even he seemed to feel it, standing there with nowhere left to direct his certainty. I stepped past him without contact, the faintest brush of air between us. The doors opened easily. Outside, the chairs waited exactly as they had been placed. Fairness isn't complicated. When someone breaks an agreement in front of witnesses, the imbalance speaks for itself. My name is Alina Marrow. I was 34 at the time, living in San Diego, working in commercial real estate operations for a mid-sized development group. I had my own apartment, a stable income, and a life that functioned whether or not anyone approved of it. By the afternoon of the canceled wedding, that hadn't changed. What had changed was the public understanding of where I belonged. That misunderstanding wasn't accidental. It had been engineered, then corrected, in front of witnesses. He and I had been together for 4 years. We didn't rush. We didn't improvise. We planned the wedding the same way we planned everything else. Budgets agreed to in writing, responsibilities divided, expectations spoken out loud. I covered vendor coordination and deposits. He handled guest lists and family logistics. It was clean, balanced, documented. In the final year, I carried more than my share. His schedule became unpredictable. Meetings ran long. Travel increased. When things slipped, I stepped in without comment. That wasn't sacrifice. It was maintenance. The decision to marry wasn't framed as romance. It was framed as alignment, shared trajectory, compatible risk tolerance. Those were his words. I accepted them because they were accurate at the time. What he didn't say, what he never said, was that he viewed proximity as leverage. That being close to him meant being provisional. I didn't learn this in a single moment. It revealed itself in small, repeatable ways. Introductions that minimized my role. Financial conversations that assumed my flexibility. Plans that shifted without consultation, followed by explanations instead of apologies. I noted it. I didn't challenge it. Not because I didn't notice, but because challenging patterns too early distorts the data. By the time he met the woman he later referred to as a better-aligned option, the groundwork was already visible. She came with capital, family access, and the kind of validation he valued. The comparison wasn't emotional. It was transactional. When he ended the wedding, he framed it as inevitability, as though circumstances had forced his hand. That framing mattered. It revealed how he understood obligation, something that holds until a superior offer appears. I didn't contest his version in the room. There was no advantage in that. The facts were already complete. Agreements don't fail because they're unclear. They fail because one party decides they're optional. After the wedding was called off, I didn't retreat. I returned to routine. On Monday morning, I was back at my desk by 7:30 a.m., badge scanned, coffee untouched. The building was quiet at that hour, the way I preferred it. I reviewed contracts first, then emails, then the development schedule I'd been managing for almost 3 years. That timeline mattered. Long before the engagement, I'd been brought onto a mixed-use hotel project on the north end of the city. 87 rooms, ground-floor retail, rooftop access limited by zoning. It wasn't glamorous work. It was operational. Cash flow modeling, vendor compliance, municipal coordination. The kind of project that rewards patience more than visibility. I wasn't the face. I was the spine. My role had expanded gradually, first as operations liaison, then as interim project lead when one of the partners stepped back for health reasons. By the second year, I was sitting in meetings with counsel, reviewing escrow structures and contingency clauses, my name appearing more frequently in internal memos. None of that was secret. It just wasn't advertised. During the same period, his career followed a different curve. He favored acceleration, visibility, proximity to people who could move him faster. He talked often about leverage, rarely about responsibility. When we discussed finances, he liked to generalize. When I asked for specifics, he deferred. We split shared expenses evenly, but the planning load stayed with me. I tracked payments. I confirmed receipts. I maintained the paper trail. He assumed things would work out because they usually had. There were moments I could have pressed, when his contribution to a joint account arrived late, when he used my credit to bridge timing gaps, when introductions shifted from my partner to someone I'm seeing. Each time, I logged the discrepancy and moved on. That restraint wasn't accidental. It was strategic. Patterns only prove themselves if you let them finish forming. By the third year, the hotel project entered its final capital phase. Funding tightened. Oversight increased. Every signature mattered. I spent weeks moving between conference rooms, legal offices, and site inspections, refining operational projections down to individual staffing lines. It was during that period that he proposed. The timing wasn't coincidental. It aligned with his sense that things were stabilizing, that my trajectory could be absorbed into his. That proximity would translate into access. I didn't correct that assumption. I didn't reinforce it either. When we discussed prenup terms, he waved it off. "We trust each other," he said. I documented my own assets anyway, quietly, completely. By the time the wedding planning accelerated, the hotel project had already locked its ownership structure. silent stakeholders, conditional authority, contingencies triggered only by specific events. My role was formalized then, in language that didn't invite interpretation. I didn't bring it home. I didn't mention it over dinner. There was no need. After the wedding ended, people asked how I was holding up. I gave them accurate answers. I was functional. I was busy. I had work to finish. What they didn't see was that nothing about my position had been reactive. Every responsibility I held had been earned incrementally, confirmed procedurally, and recorded in writing. Outcomes don't surprise people who prepare for them. They surprise people who assume preparation belongs to someone else. The hotel project wasn't designed around personalities. It was designed around risk. From the beginning, the partners structured it to survive volatility, market shifts, funding delays, leadership changes. Authority was distributed deliberately. Control was conditional. No single individual could override the system without triggering safeguards. By the time construction finished, those safeguards were no longer theoretical. My role had evolved into a formal operational authority with specific triggers attached. I wasn't a majority owner. I didn't need to be. I held conditional control tied to continuity, compliance, and execution. The language was precise, dry, unemotional. It took months to finalize. There were reviews, revisions, outside counsel confirmations. Every clause was tested against worst-case scenarios. The goal wasn't dominance, it was stability. One clause in particular mattered. If a primary stakeholder failed to meet fiduciary or reputational standards during a defined pre-opening period, operational authority shifted automatically to the designated continuity officer. No vote required, no discretion applied, just activation. That officer was me. The clause existed long before the wedding. It had nothing to do with him. At least it hadn't been written for him. It existed because projects at that scale attract people who confuse visibility with entitlement. Triggering it wasn't instantaneous. It required documentation, timeline verification, third-party confirmation. I didn't rush that process. In the weeks after the wedding was called off, I met with counsel twice, once to confirm thresholds, once to review documentation standards. We didn't discuss motives, we discussed facts. Public conduct mattered. So did timing. So did how actions reflected on associated ventures. The wedding cancellation had been witnessed, recorded indirectly through vendor communications, logged through canceled contracts that referenced his name and role. It created a traceable reputational event tied to the project's opening window. I submitted the documentation as required, nothing more, nothing less. There was a review period, 2 weeks. During that time, nothing happened outwardly. No notifications, no confrontations, silence by design. I continued attending site meetings, reviewing staffing plans, approving vendor onboarding. The project moved forward uninterrupted. At the end of the review period, I received a single email from counsel. 3 sentences, no adjectives. The clause had been triggered, authority reassigned, notices prepared. Once that happened, reversal was no longer a matter of conversation. It could only be altered by time, performance, and a formal remediation process outlined in the operating agreement. Apologies weren't listed. I didn't inform him. That wasn't my role. The system doesn't announce itself. It functions. By the time invitations went out for the hotel's opening event, the structure was already set. Seating charts finalized. Guest lists approved. Ownership disclosures prepared for institutional partners. From the outside, nothing looked different. That's how effective leverage works. It doesn't announce intention. It waits for confirmation. Preparation isn't punishment. It's a form of responsibility. Systems don't take sides. They respond to what's placed into them. The opening event was scheduled for a Thursday evening. Invitations had gone out weeks earlier, printed on heavy stock, minimalist design. The kind of presentation meant to signal seriousness without excess. I arrived early. That wasn't unusual. I took my seat near the side of the room, close enough to hear, far enough to remain peripheral. A glass of water was already placed at each setting. I turned mine once, aligning the rim with the edge of the table, then left it untouched. The room filled gradually. Investors first. Then city representatives. Legal counsel clustered near the front, reviewing final notes. The energy was anticipatory but contained. He arrived 20 minutes in, confident, well-dressed, scanning for recognition. He greeted people with the familiarity of someone who assumed access had already been granted. When he saw me, he paused, just long enough to register surprise. Not concern, surprise. He approached my table, smiling as if continuity were owed to him. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "I'm on the program," I replied. That was all. He laughed softly, dismissing the comment. "Of course you are," he gestured toward the front. "Big night." I nodded once. Silence settled between us. He filled it by straightening his jacket and moving on. The formal remarks began shortly after. The managing partner stepped forward, welcomed the guests, thanked the city, spoke about vision and execution. The cadence was practiced. Then counsel took the floor. This was the pivot point. Not dramatic, procedural. "As part of our standard disclosure," she said, "we'll be confirming the project's current operational authority." A pause, papers adjusted. The room quieted. She read the designation cleanly. My name. My title effective immediately. There was a brief delay before the reaction registered. People glanced at their programs, at me, at the front. He stood halfway out of his chair. "That's not correct," he said, too loud, too fast. Counsel didn't look at him. "The designation was confirmed following the operating agreement's continuity provisions," she said. "All documentation is on file." He laughed again, sharper this time. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Silence returned, intentional, dense. The managing partner spoke next. "There hasn't." He turned toward me fully now. "You knew about this?" I didn't answer. I picked up the water glass, took a single sip and set it back down. He moved closer to the front. "This is absurd," he said. "I'm a primary stakeholder." Counsel nodded. "You were." That landed harder than anything else. He began speaking quickly then, referencing past meetings, contributions, relationships. His voice climbed as the room stayed still. "This is about the wedding," he said suddenly, pointing. "This is personal." The managing partner didn't raise his voice. "It's contractual." He looked around for support, found none. "You can't do this without notifying me," he said. "You were notified," counsel replied. "Through formal channels, delivery was confirmed." He faltered, checked his phone, scrolled, his face tightened. "This can be fixed," he said, lowering his voice. "We can talk after." I finally looked at him. "This isn't a conversation," I said. 2 sentences, even, corrective. He shook his head. "You planned this." "No," I said. "I maintained it." That was enough. Security didn't intervene. They didn't need to. The collapse was internal. He sat back down slowly, as if gravity had changed. The rest of the presentation continued. Staffing timelines, operational readiness, applause at the appropriate intervals. I listened, took notes. The room adjusted around the new reality without comment. When it ended, people stood. Conversations resumed. He remained seated. No one approached him. Consequences don't announce themselves. They arrive, confirmed, and proceed without asking permission. Part 6. Must follow word count Part 6. Consequences over time. I wasn't present for what followed. That distance mattered. 2 weeks after the opening, the first challenge was filed. Not dramatic, not public. A formal request for review, rooted through counsel, citing misunderstanding and procedural overreach. It was denied quietly, based on documentation already on record. A month later, a second attempt followed. This one leaned on personal contribution and informal assurances. It failed for the same reason. Informal assurances don't override executed agreements. By the end of the quarter, the matter stopped moving forward. There were no more filings. No more letters. The system had finished responding. I learned about the rest indirectly. A colleague mentioned he'd been removed from an advisory board he'd once referenced frequently. Another noted that his access to certain investor circles had narrowed. Invitations stopped arriving. Introductions cooled. Momentum doesn't reverse loudly. It thins. By the end of the year, he'd relocated. Not dramatically, just a quieter address. Smaller footprint. Fewer overlaps. There were no confrontations, No attempts at explanation. The absence was complete. Occasionally, someone would ask if I felt vindicated. I corrected them. This wasn't vindication. It was resolution. The hotel opened fully staffed. Occupancy stabilized ahead of projections. Reviews focused on service consistency and operational clarity. The kind of feedback that doesn't mention names. Once, I saw a brief industry notice referencing a restructuring tied to conduct misalignment. It didn't specify details. It didn't need to. I never reached out. He never did either. Time did what it's designed to do. It clarified outcomes. Accountability isn't personal. It's cumulative. When systems are built correctly, they don't require emotional input to function. They only require accurate records and patience. What follows a breach isn't punishment. It's separation. Part 7 must follow word count Part 7. Cold aftermath and resolution, the work settled into its proper shape after that. I didn't change my schedule. I didn't announce anything. I showed up, reviewed reports, signed what needed signing, and left when the day was finished. Authority doesn't require emphasis when it's already documented. Months passed. The hotel found its rhythm. Staff turnover stabilized. Vendor performance improved once expectations were clarified and enforced. Small adjustments made early prevented larger corrections later. That's how operational order works. People stopped asking about him, not intentionally. Just gradually, topics drifted elsewhere. New projects, new names, time redistributed attention without instruction. I moved apartments that winter. A practical decision. Shorter commute, better light. The boxes were unpacked in a single weekend. Everything fit. Once, at a networking event, someone mentioned the wedding in passing. Not cruelly, not nostalgically. As an incomplete story that had lost its relevance. I acknowledged it with a nod and redirected the conversation. There was nothing left to clarify. I didn't frame what happened as loss or victory. Those are emotional shortcuts. This was alignment correcting itself. There's a difference between walking away and being removed. One preserves choice. The other exposes the absence of it. I still believe in agreements, in clarity, in systems that reward consistency over performance. What changed wasn't my outlook. It was the environment finally reflecting the work that had already been done. Sometimes, late in the evening, I stand near the windows of the upper floors and look out at the city as it moves uninterrupted. Lights shift, traffic reroutes, structures hold. I don't think about him then. I think about continuity. Justice doesn't require spectacle to be complete. It requires boundaries to remain intact. The matter was finished, and it stayed that way.